Good morning. Happy Father's Day. Today I don't think we don't just celebrate fathers. I think we also celebrate those who step in as father role-like positions, who are role models. And I know that's many of you. Many of you serve. You may not be a father yourself, but you serve Jesus in the roles of role models, mentors, of good co-workers and friends. And that's something that we want to honor all of the men in this church who want to take seriously the call to follow Jesus, to love God and love people, and they bring that into every relationship of their life. And let me tell you, God is doing something with that. And the role that God is doing that, it speaks all throughout Scripture. Like one verse is the book of Psalms. It says in Psalm 103, if you'll throw up on the screen for me, please, so I can read it. It says, wow, that's tiny print. It says, as a father shows compassion to his children, so the Lord shows compassion to those who fear him. You see, there's this unique connection between the way a father loves and how we interpret how God loves us. And so, men, let me tell you, you have a huge responsibility, a huge honor, and a huge impact upon the lives of others. Whether you are an actual father or you are a father-like figure in someone else's life, when you take seriously the call to love Jesus, to love God and love people, God is doing something with that. So we want to honor all of you men who do that in your business, in your home, in your personal life, because you guys really are making a difference. Now, back on Mother's Day, we started something new. We might continue doing it in the future, I don't know. But on Mother's Day, rather than, listening to some dude talk about how to be a mother, which is always, in my opinion, silly, we invited Alexa Foster up on stage and just to hear her wisdom on and her experience of motherhood. And so we thought for Father's Day we'd do the exact same. And so today I have a guest up here on stage. Would you welcome with me Neil Yarbrough?
Thank you, Mason.
Neil, I'm really glad that you're up here with me. As you can tell, I'm not sounding too good right now, which in some ways I'm like, okay, this is perfect because I don't have to do a whole lot of talking today.
I was planning on you carrying this conversation.
Oh, well, if anything, this is a beautiful reminder to me that, as a pastor, I think the best service I can offer people is not talking, but just listening, like this.
I'm not singing.
Yes.
Not singing.
And so I'm happy to just sit here and listen to your story and what wisdom you can share with us. So why don't you just go ahead? Maybe not everyone knows who you are, so would you just introduce yourself and share a little bit about your story?
Okay. Well, first of all, Mason likes to do disclaimers before his sermons. And so I'm going to put a disclaimer out there that I am not the perfect dad. I've made lots and lots of mistakes. I'm not the perfect Christian, made lots and lots of mistakes. So don't take anything I say as gospel, but just going to share with you guys about what it's like to be a dad. But yeah, my name's Neil Yarbrough. I was born and raised here in Butler County. Shelly, my wife, married 22 years now. I got 3 boys. Brendan is the oldest, Blake's the middle, and Bodie's the youngest, who's back in Bluff Kids. And so, yeah, I've been managing director for Ozark National Life insurance company I work for, so out of Kansas City. So it's nice to meet you guys.
Awesome. So obviously, since we're in church, we're going to talk about Jesus. So I'm curious on if you would share just a little bit about maybe where you and Jesus are or have been, or what's your relationship with Jesus like, and how has that kind of impacted the many roles you have as a man, as a businessman, husband, father? If you will speak a little bit on that.
Okay. Yeah, so my Christianity started when I was 8 years old. Was going to church at First Baptist Church. Probably many of you guys know where that's at here in town. And was baptized there at 8 years old. Attended church regularly. And, was really strong in my faith. Had some hiccups as a teenager, and some things that happened, and you feel like, hey, I fell away from following Christ. Luckily, I was very fortunate to meet someone that was very strong in her faith that led me back, and so that was something that was very, very important to me to get to where I am today. And I would for sure not be probably if I hadn't have met her. But as far as how it impacts what I do and the roles that, everybody carries through work and as being a father and those types of things. And the things that you learn in the Bible that impacts me the most is you're called to be a servant. You're here to serve other people, and whether that's in a relationship that you have with a client, making sure that their needs are ahead of your own, whether it's being a dad and making sure your kids have what they need and making sure that they have the wisdom that they need, or being a husband and being there to not only about what you want to do, sometimes it's things that your spouse wants to do. And so that's something that's real important. I think a lot of times gets overlooked in this society today because it seems like it is a me generation, where it's all about me. And I think it's hard sometimes for younger people to understand that important part of serving in Christianity is a service that you provide.
Yeah, that's really good. And you're right about that. Like, something we say all the time here at the church is we want service to be kind of like part of your DNA. And like, we always encourage people, hey, serve in the church. But, I always say, like, if you're not serving at home, don't come and serve here first. So, like, you got to start at your home first. And so I like the fact that you brought that up. And we weren't planned for this conversation or this question, but I've got one that popped in my head. In your role as a husband and father, like, what are some unique aspects of service that you think a husband and father, like, what does that look like compared to any other role in the family? Because this is a very special role in a family as a husband and father. So you talk about service is very big. Like, what are some of the unique aspects of service that you think, like, hey, this is crucial that I serve in this capacity or in this way?
So I don't think there's any profound, large things that you do that all of a sudden you're like, man, that's a huge service that you're doing. It's all the little things in life. Everything is whether it's from doing something as simple as washing dishes or helping clean the house or doing those types of things. So, it's one of those things that we've always not had traditional roles. It's not you do this and I do this, and we're just kind of, a lot of families today are two-income households. Both the husband and wife work, and so everybody has things on their plate and stress, and so it's just both of our jobs to come together and get the things done that needs to be done. But as far as with the kids, one of the things that you want to make sure, and we'll talk a little bit more about this. I know it's a question a little bit later that we'll be talking about, but it's just helping them realize where you stand. What's important to you, and helping them in that regard. Yeah.
Well, while you mentioned that, you're raising 3 boys. So what's that like?
Well, Mason, you need to have 3. so
everyone keeps telling me, when am I having the next kid? I'm like, we're still trying to get the first one underway.
Oh yeah. So parents. It's when it comes to raising boys, it was kind of funny. One of the things that everybody told us, boys are a little bit more rambunctious than girls, and I've had it equated a couple of different ways. But boys are harder to keep alive when they're little, but they're a lot easier when they're older. They're less drama than girls, and so you kind of get that trade-off. As long as you can get them, to teenage
keep them alive till they're teenagers.
A lot more rambunctious. Boys aren't the type that usually like to sit down and color for a couple hours, or anything like that. It's always moving to the next one, so a lot more energy involved in that type of thing. But no, it's something that it's hard to explain to people, exactly what it's like having 3 kids and that type of thing. But it's also been one of the most rewarding things that you'll do, even though sometimes they drive you crazy and you're thinking, oh my goodness, why would you do that? And then you remember, oh, it's because they're my kids. That's why they do stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm told a lot by my parents of like, just wait, you'll start to see yourself in your kids and things like that. And like we're realizing that with our daughter Harper, that she is put it nicely, very persistent and determined. Mm-hmm. Probably not so much nice would be saying she's very stubborn, and that clearly comes from me. So it's been kind of fun, and I'm looking forward to the years ahead, being able to point out those things like you're saying of like, why are you doing this? It's because you're my child.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thinking back to that term, I imagine each kid is different, and we don't say like, oh hey, you gotta raise every kid the exact same. Each kid needs a different level of parenting or different style and stuff like that. But I think we always try to communicate the same core values and the same like life lessons. And so for you as a father, like what are the like you might approach it differently with each kid, but like what are the like the core values or the life lessons you're like, man, if my kids they get out of the house and they know these things, like that's I communicated the things that value to me that value I want them to have a value for as well.
Yeah. Well, some of the values that were instilled in me, it's you need to try to do your best. You need to, have a good work ethic. You need to work hard in whatever it is that you decide to do in life. But some of the other things that are important too is try to instill them to be kind. To everybody that you run into, you don't know their story, you don't know the things that they've had to deal with in life, and so you want to be kind to people and be approachable. It's something that I've tried to instill in them is you want to have conversations with people. The more conversations you have with people, the more things that you'll learn about them. And it's one of those things that's not easy to do. Obviously, I grew up as a shy kid and didn't want to, get out of my bubble and talk to people. And that's something that's has developed through the years. That's one thing I would love to instill in them. The sooner that you can do that, the better off that you'll be, just because the more relationships you have with different people, the more ideas that you can gather from them and life experiences that you can gather from other people. And so it's always interesting to talk to people like that. So,
Yeah, I heard someone give me this wisdom once of be more interested in people than trying to be interesting yourself.
Yeah.
And that's always kind of stuck with me. I apologize, everyone. Okay, so you have, obviously, three boys, like we've already discussed and all. Two of them are at the point where they're kind of like at that transition swing from boy into man. And so what are you finding is kind of crucial for that transition? Because not everyone goes through that transition very well. Like I've met middle-aged men who aren't really men, they're just middle-aged boys. And so I think there's, not pointing out anyone by name, no. But I'm noticing that more and more in our world. So like you have two sons who are at that transition stage. So what are you thinking, like, okay, I want my boys to be men. What are you finding that you're needing to do or teach, or what do you think is important for that transition between a boy and a man?
Yeah, and you don't get any help from pop culture to this day and age for sure. So you do need to be having conversations with them, and it's not the easiest thing in the world, to always do that, because us men, we don't like to have a lot of conversations and communicate and do the things with family as much as we'd like to. We're not known as the communicators. That's usually the wife's job. So, but some of the things that I think are very important is to help them realize that, kind of the question that you posed to me was, the difference between being male and being a man. Obviously, anybody can be male, but to transition into being the man that you want to be, taking responsibility, for the actions that you have, and realizing that it's something that is so crucial for them to realize that what background they come from has a lot of determination of where they end up. And so even if we make mistakes along the way, and I've made plenty of mistakes along the way, that having a good foundation that I can provide for them, even if they do stray away, will come back, and so that's something that's really crucial. But men in general, dads in general, being Father's Day, today are portrayed as being a couple of things, either irrelevant and not needed, or just being the goofball that doesn't know anything, that always gets things wrong. And so, just helping them realize that that's not your role. You have a very, very important part of your family to make sure that, to raise your kids right, to be an upstanding member of the community, to be successful, you've got to realize that that's a very, very important role. And the Bible tells us, as the household, as father goes, is how the household's going to go. And you see that when people are, as a post I saw today for Father's Day, somebody posted on there, when the father becomes a Christian, 93% of the time the whole family becomes a Christian. Whereas when it's a mother, it's not a knock on mothers, but it's just saying, typically dads for some whatever reason, when they do see that, it's something that's real important. So, it's one of those things that help them realize how important it is for them to instill that in their family and lead their family that way.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point. Like when I was growing up, Mother's Day was always, we'll listen to a sermon about how great mothers were, and then Father's Day would come around and we'd listen to a sermon about how terrible fathers are. And and maybe many of you kind of grew up in a similar culture, and you're right. Pop culture, TV, like fathers are not always presented in the best way. They're always goofy, they're dorky, they get things wrong all the time. But it is a very crucial role for the family. And for many of you, I know maybe you haven't had a father figure in your life or a physical father, but maybe you've been blessed with role models or men who kind of help step in. I know there was a period of my life where my dad was deployed for 2 years, and you do a lot of growing up for 2 years without a dad in the house. And so I had a lot of men in the church who kind of stepped in, who were like, "Hey, we're going to help be a father figure to you." And so even if it was like, "Hey, we're just going to go grab ice cream and just chat about life," like I was very fortunate at that time frame. So it's like many of you, if you maybe not be a father yourself, or you may not have been, you may not have had a father in your life. That doesn't mean you can't still have that influence, like you're saying. You carry a lot of weight and responsibility into the community. So, so let me ask you 2 questions. One, looking back, and one, looking forward. So looking back, if you had to go and you could have a conversation with your younger teenage self, what advice would you say to yourself? Like, what would you tell yourself if you could go back in time and talk to yourself?
Yeah, there's tons and tons and tons of things that I could go back and tell myself of things. You probably shouldn't do that, but knowing my teenage self, I probably wouldn't have listened to myself anyway, so that probably wouldn't do a whole lot of good. So, no, one thing I think would be really crucial for any teenager to know is way too often we look at we value what other people think of us. And we value too much of what our appeared status would be. And we look at that and we place too much value of fitting in, going along, and that leads us to a lot of places that we shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And so, but just because we want to fit in and we want to think like, hey, we're part of the cool kids, we're part of the crowd, and so that leads us down an area that it gets us in trouble a lot of times because we do things that aren't part of what our core values are. And so if I could give myself any advice, is I would go back and say, hey, don't value what other people think about you more than the value that God has already placed in you.
That's good.
And so, it's one of those things that He values us no matter what we do.
Yeah.
No matter what we do, no matter what mistakes we make, there's that inherent value that He has in us that it's so easy as kids to not see, not think about, not really realize how important that is, and then to look off and think, man, I wish this person thought this of me, or I wish this person liked me, and way too often we just get way in trouble hoping to impress other people that we really shouldn't be worried about impressing.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, like that's advice that I think many adults just need today.
Yeah.
Not just teenage self, but many people need just today as a reminder. So thank you for that. So then the looking forward, and this is kind of building off of this imagery of man and father and husband that you kind of presented, of like how you kind of lead and influence the family so influentially. So looking 5 years from now, where do you hope to be as a family? Like, what are you celebrating? What are the dreams you're like, hey, we're moving towards this? Like, what are you thinking 5 years from now as a family?
So,
Sorry.
This is where I'm supposed to give my 5-year plan.
I'm not interested in your financial plan.
Work, yeah, come on, 5-year plan for family? No, one thing, I have varying different degrees of that, because like you mentioned, I got 2 kids that are, one's already in college, one's going to be a senior this next year in high school, and then I have a 7-year-old. And so, obviously it's a little different than probably what I imagined what 5 years was going to be looking like. Because 5 years from now, if I didn't have the youngest one, I'd be like, oh, we'd be empty nesters, have some money in my pocket maybe. But no, Well, a couple of things, I just hope the best for my kids, and they're successful and happy in their careers in any way that, I can help them do that. That's something that, I want to do for them. It's transitioning, from 5 years from now, from that 7-year-old transitioning into the teenage years again and having a starting over with teenagers. And so, it's definitely something that love to see them, the older ones, grow and develop into good Christian men, and then seeing your youngest one, following those footsteps and following Christ. And so, just making sure everybody's happy and healthy is, obviously Dad's main goal.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Okay, so one final question. Is there any last bit of encouragement that you can share with all of us?
Yeah, definitely. So I grew up in a household, like I mentioned, as far as if dads follow, how often the kids do. So I grew up in a household where my mom went to church all the time, and us kids went to church all the time. Of course, as younger kids, it was because mom says you're going, we're taking you to church. So, but it was always that thing of thinking, man, why Dad doesn't go to church, and that type of thing. And so now Dad today goes to church just about every Sunday, pretty regular. And so I'm glad that he made that decision and found that was important in his life later on. But it always makes you wonder as kids, how important is it if both parents aren't going? If one parent's going and the other one's not going, is it something that I really need to value? Is it something that's real important? So that being said, if you're here today, or if you're bringing your kids to church on a regular basis as a dad, you already have a huge foothold ahead of everything else that you could do. So like I said earlier, I'm not a perfect dad, don't claim to be, not going to be, and that's okay. You know what? If I can help instill some of the things that they're going to need in life and get them around other people who have other values too and that they can learn from, it's a crucial step. That's probably one of the biggest first steps that you can make is, hey, you know what? I think it's important. I'm going to make sure that I'm here so you know that I value it. You're going to value that as well. So if you're here as a dad today, you're already making a huge step in the right direction to leading your kids into a nice, healthy relationship with Christ.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Neil. Can we all give him a round of applause? All right. I'll go ahead and pray. Father God, thank you for this day. Thank you for allowing Neil to be up here to just share his story, what he's learned as a man, as a businessman, as a husband and father, and just being able to share that wisdom with us as a great source of encouragement this morning. I ask that your hand might be upon him and his family right now through the situations in their life, that you be working it out all according to your will. It's in your name I pray. Amen. All right. Thank you, everyone.